Jack Stewart is a retired U.S. Navy fighter pilot with over 20 years of service, including multiple combat deployments and an assignment to the Joint Special Operations Command. He graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy and Top Gun and holds a master's in global leadership from the University of San Diego. He's a USA Today bestselling author of Silent Horizons, W.E.B. Griffin Direct Action, and the Battleborn series. He lives in Dallas, Texas with his wife and 3 children. His new story, Hauling the Mail, is featured in the upcoming anthology Rough Country, edited by Revis Wortham and published by Roan and Weatherford Publishing. Welcome to West of the Page, Jack. So tell us about your story.
Well, Hauling the Mail is really about a golden era of aviation. So after World War I, there were a lot of surplus airplanes, and that's really when the United States started seeing a golden age of aviation. There were barnstormers, there were airmail pilots. And so this story follows an airmail pilot who in Wyoming and the Rockies around Colorado, and he stumbles across a bootlegging operation.
So let's talk a little bit about you as a retired Navy fighter pilot and Top Gun graduate. How did your military aviation experience influence the aerial action and fight maneuvers?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's one of my favorite parts of the story, is really putting the reader inside the cockpit and really getting a chance to feel what it's like engaged in a sort of dogfight. And it's, it should be a visceral feeling. And really that's something that I experienced, as a Navy fighter pilot during my career, and got a chance to feel it myself. So now I want the readers to feel the same thing. So I really take readers along for a ride in this story.
That's awesome. So how accurate are the Top Gun movies?
Not accurate at all, but that's okay. The first one is the reason I wanted to become a Navy fighter pilot, and the second one came out the day I retired, and it was just really fun. And that's what a good movie or a good story should be. It should just be fun and enjoyable, and I thought both of them accomplished that quite well, even though they're not accurate at all.
I'm sure you get that a lot.
Yeah, I do. It's okay. My wife and I went and saw the second movie. I think it was the day after I retired, and I just had a big grin on my face the entire time. I enjoyed it from start to finish. They did a remarkable job with that movie.
That's awesome, because I loved it too. My husband is former Army, but he flies airplanes now, and he actually really enjoyed it too. So let's talk about some of these intense and cinematic scenes. Do you draw on your combat experience when crafting those? And how do you balance realism with storytelling?
Yeah, sometimes some combat experience, some in training. My last job in the Navy was as a adversary pilot, so my job was to train other pilots on how to dogfight, and so I really got a chance to get into the psychology of the enemy. And so I'm always kind of thinking about what the other person is doing. And so, I kind of drew on that a little bit, but again, I don't want to bore people with, details of horsepower and, turn circles and climb rates and stuff like that. But because it just bogs the story down. So you just got to keep moving the story forward. And so, in this particular story, it's one kind of fateful flight, and it's kind of a calamity of events that happens along the way, and I really want the cinematic aerial combat scenes to drive the protagonist forward to the conclusion.
Will you actually tell us a little bit about the protagonist and where that inspiration came from?
Yeah, I mean, the inspiration, okay, so first thing I'm gonna call it out right up front. My call sign in the Navy was Farley, and I was named that because I had some Chris Farley, Tommy Boy-like mannerisms. So if anybody knows the movie Tommy Boy, they know that his name is Tom Callahan. And so that's what I named the character after. It was just really an homage to my call sign. It had nothing to do with the actual character himself. But the character in my story, Tom Callahan, he was, a former pilot that flew in the war. So he has that experience from the war that kind of comes back and at key times really in this, where he should be safe. He's an airmail pilot. He shouldn't be encountering enemy planes in the sky, but he is. And so he's kind of recalling his experiences over in Europe, and is kind of using that to drive onward.
I love the connection with Chris Farley too. That's awesome.
So did you pick up on that?
I mean, as soon as you said Farley, yeah,
Yeah.
I was immediately like, ooh, Chris Farley.
Yeah.
Yes, he's an icon.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. So, how did it feel to write a story included in this anthology that benefits the US Marshals, given your own background in military service?
I mean, it's a huge honor. Obviously I'm a big supporter of the military. I'm a big supporter of law enforcement. And so when Revis approached me with this opportunity, I didn't even hesitate. I'm like, absolutely, it goes to a good cause. I'm good friends with Mark Cameron, also another author. And I know that he was a US Marshal. And so, anything I can do to help people like him and their families, that's really important to me. So I really just wanted to write a story that kind of brought that out a little bit and kind of highlighted what the US Marshals do and their history a little bit. And so for me, it was a really fun, and it was a true honor to do.
You mentioned that Revis approached you. So how do you know like Revis? Do you have a connection just in the writing world?
Yeah. We actually live in the same town, north of
Okay.
Dallas. And we met at a few writing conferences, and then there was a small art festival. It was called Art Walk out in West Texas, in Alpine, Texas, and he went to that, so we got a chance to spend some time together. And so I've really gotten to know him and his wife, and he's gotten to know me and my wife, and it was really kind of a no-brainer, I think, for us to work together on this.
He has brought in so many amazing authors with such amazing backgrounds. So, do you write a lot about, what do you write more about? Historical or more military, or a combination of both?
No, this was honestly the first historical fiction that I've written. I primarily write modern day espionage military thrillers. So I'm currently writing for the Tom Clancy estate. I write for the Jack Ryan Jr. series. And so I that's kind of the genre that I'm in. I like telling stories about naval aviation in particular, because there really aren't that many books out there about that. But yeah, this was kind of fun for me. I had to do a little bit of research and look into the past, and but it was kind of nice as a pilot to kind of go back and look at the history of aviation and really how it's changed over the years, and it was pretty fun.
So, is writing your full-time job now since retiring from service?
No, it's not. I fly for Southwest Airlines. I'm a captain based in Dallas, so I fly a full schedule, and I write my books on the side. It's quickly becoming more than just a side hustle. It's starting to become like a full-time job, but I enjoy both of them.
Very cool. My husband is a captain for Frontier. He's based out of
Oh,
Las Vegas. So
oh, awesome! There you go.
yeah,
So
maybe.
you understand the lifestyle.
Yes, yes, I absolutely do. It can be tough,
Yeah, you can.
but
Yep,
I mean, you're doing what you love. So
that's right. That's right.
with this being your first kind of foray into historical fiction, it's set in the 20s, with early airmail pilots. Like, so what made you choose? So a lot of people are like genuinely like almost always drawn to World War II, but
Right.
it seems like this was right after World War One. So what drew you to that?
For me, it was just that era of aviation in our country in particular, because there were so many surplus airplanes that, the government had no idea what to do with, so they just dumped them out there. And I mean, literally, that's where barnstormers came from, because these high performing airplanes were just now available for the general public, and so people would just fly them. And they would do stunts and stuff, obviously to entertain people. But then the airmail kind of started, and so really that was, I'd say, the genesis of general aviation in America. Was kind of in that era with all the surplus airplanes. My grandfather was a B-17 pilot in World War II, so I definitely am drawn to that era, because I have all his logbooks, and heard all the stories. I mean, I have his his bomber jacket in a shadow box on my wall in my office. So that really influenced me, but this was a really cool era to explore.
Is that like what made you want to go into service in the first place? Was your grandfather?
Yeah, I mean, it influenced it for sure. My dad was a private pilot, and so he flew for fun. And so I'd always go to air shows with him, and he would go look at the civilian aerobatic airplanes, and I would go look at the military airplanes. If they were gray or green, I was looking at them. And so I was definitely interested in the military, partly because of my grandfather, but there were, I don't know, I was just drawn to it from a very early age. I just knew that's what I wanted to do.
Sounds familiar. Yeah. I think once you fall in love with aviation, it's almost impossible to let it go.
Yeah, absolutely. My 18-year-old son just got his pilot's license, and he, hoping to follow my footsteps and go in the Navy and be a fighter pilot. And we'll see what happens. But I think it's just, if it's in you, it's in you. My oldest has no interest in aviation whatsoever, but my other one does. So
It's funny that you mentioned that because one of our other hosts and publishers, her husband is also a pilot, and her now 21-year-old son just got his private license, and he just did his cross country. And so I guess it runs in the families too.
it sure does. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit, because it's just too cool not to talk about Top Gun. Tell us about it. Tell us about how did you do it?
Well, okay. So first of all, in both movies, they showed Top Gun being in San Diego. When the first movie came out, it was in San Diego at Marine Corps Air Station, or what's now Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. They moved it to Fallon, Nevada. So now Top Gun is actually in the middle of nowhere in the high desert of Nevada. So it's east of Reno by about an hour, which is not a really glamorous place to film a movie, but it's a great place for aerial training. And when you go there and you go out to the course, it's 7 days a week, early mornings, late nights, and all you do is brief, fly, debrief, maybe twice a day. And then you go to the officers club, you have some beers with your friends, and then you go to sleep and you do it all over again. And I had a great time doing it. I went through what was called the adversary course. So you have two groups. You have the fighters that learn blue tactics, which are friendly tactics. And then you have the other half, like me, going through as an adversary, where we would learn what the Chinese do, what the Russians do, what threat countries do. And so we learn how to replicate their tactics, their aircraft, their weapons. And then we would oppose the fighters that were going through the course. And I just had such a great time. There's a funny little thing that when you go through the class, if you quote the movie, the original movie, then you're fined, and that fine goes, into a bucket of money for a party at the end of class. And I made it my goal to quote the movie so many times. I ended up getting a lot of instructors frustrated with me for the amount of times I would quote the movie, but I was like, I'm having fun with this. You can find me all you want to.
Mm-hmm. So what's like something, because you said the movies are not accurate. What's one of the biggest things that you're like, eh?
Yeah, shirtless volleyball in your jeans. That doesn't happen. I tried one time and all my classmates said no. But I'd say beyond that, it's really there's not a competition, so there's no Top Gun trophy, and you're not like competing to be the best. I mean, we are all type A personalities, so we want to be the best, but it really is a cooperate to graduate mentality. We're working together. We're trying to help each other out. And what the other thing that the movies don't really convey is that the course is designed to teach you how to be an instructor. So when you leave Top Gun, you are a tactics instructor. So you go back to your squadron, you go to a weapons school, and your job is to now pass along what you've learned. And so it's really not designed to be like, hey, I'm the best of the best and I can, show you how good I am. It's really, hey, let me show you how good you can be. And so the movies don't really quite grasp that, but that's okay. Like I said, they're fun anyway.
Yeah, I'm honestly, now it makes me want to go watch them. So
yeah.
I mean, I feel like at least the first one, it's like a classic in America.
Oh, it is. It is. It is.
Um, so going back to writing, though, I think we could probably get sidetracked on a lot of things because you have a lot, you have a lot that you've done. But when did you first start writing?
Well, so I've always dabbled in writing. I'll say, like, I always loved writing stories. I would start to write a book, and I get a chapter in, and then I would just throw it away. It was just something I enjoyed doing. I loved telling stories, but the thing is, I didn't know how to tell a complete story. I didn't know how a story is supposed to be structured. And then I'd say 2020 is really when I said, okay, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna go ahead and really try hard to write my first book and finish it. And I was kind of surprised that when I finished that first book, I realized it wasn't as daunting a task as I realized. Now, it was a terrible book, and it'll never see the light of day. I basically made every single mistake that a new author could make, but it taught me that I could do it. And so then I wrote another one, and each one I progressively got better. I started becoming more of a student on how to tell a story, and now it's just become, how can I continue to improve and hone my crafts, tell a better story, keep the readers turning the pages, just really give them something to enjoy. And so I'd say it's been, the last 6 years that I've really taken it seriously, but I've always been a reader. I've always been a writer. It's always been just part of my life.
What was the first book or, article or that was published?
So I had a few articles that were published online on like a military aviation sort of centric website. One of them, actually, if you go on my website, you can see it. It's about it was an article I wrote, kind of a satire piece on quotes at Top Gun. And so it's a little bit of poking fun at what I just told you about, being fined on the quotes. But actually seeing something in print in my hands for the first time was my first book, Unknown Rider, which came out in November 2023. And it was the first book in my Battleborn series. And it just, from that point, it's just, it's really taken off. I've got 6 published right now, another one coming out in May, another one coming out in September, probably 4 coming out next year. So it's, wow, like I said, it's becoming a full-time job.
Yeah.
Do you write when you're on your trips?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes if I have a shorter overnight and I'm not leaving the hotel, or if the hotel is someplace where I really don't want to get out, then I'll break open my laptop and start writing. I really don't turn on my TV in my room at all. Lately I've been trying to use my overnights as a way to kind of recharge my batteries and just try to get out and walk around. So writing now on my trips is it's becoming the exception instead of the rule.
So it's when you come home and you're in your office.
Yeah, when I'm in my office and I try to block off a period of time, my wife and I'll go work out in the morning, and then after that, until maybe like 2, 3, 4, somewhere around there, when the kids start coming home from school, and then I turn it off and really focus on the family for the rest of the time. But it's literally, I'd say every day that I'm home, that I'm not flying, is I'm writing for at least 4 or 5 hours a day.
Wow. Do you ever take a day off?
Not really. Not really. I'm getting ready to go to Disneyland for spring break with my kids, so I'm gonna try not to, but I think it's pretty impossible. Will write some.
You mentioned earlier the Jack Ryan Jr. series. Tell us about what that is and how you got into that.
Yeah, so I kind of joke, because it's funny that I ended up with overlapping contracts and deadlines. So it was like I had to have a book done every 3 months. And then I had turned in, like, I think it was the book number 5 out of 6 that I was contracted to write. And I had a whole year to do that last one. I was like, yes, I can take a break. I can relax. And then my agent called and said, hey, would you be interested in writing for the W.E.B. Griffin estate? And it was one of the authors I grew up reading, and I couldn't turn it down. I said, absolutely, would love to. And so that introduced me to Tom Colgan, who's my editor at Putnam. And he also manages the Tom Clancy estate. And so I kind of knew that this was sort of an audition, if you will. Like if he liked me and I turned it in on time and it was a good product, that he would keep me in mind if an opening came up. And I knew all the guys who were writing for Clancy at the time, and so I was kind of bugging them like, "Hey, are you guys going to quit anytime soon?" And no one told me they were. But then one day, the couple authors, Andrews and Wilson, stepped down, and an opening showed up for me. And so Tom asked if I'd want to do it, and I said I would love to. And so I stepped in. I can't remember. I think it's book number 15 in the series was my first one that I wrote that comes out this September, and then I just signed a contract for 2 more. So there's a whole catalog of books that I have to go back through to make sure I'm not missing out on any kind of details. And but they're books that I read growing up. I read all through my military career, and so being able to contribute to that series and that legacy is just a huge honor. So I definitely take it. It's kind of, I feel like it's sort of weighty. Like I have a responsibility, to not ruin this legacy, and so I have to put a lot of work into it. But I really enjoyed telling those stories.
I love hearing these kind of stories about authors who, okay, I'm going to write a book, and then suddenly their career takes off, and you're like, okay, I'm an author. I'm a writer. I
Yeah.
can do this.
Yeah. I still don't really consider myself there quite yet, which is funny. I know, with having 6 published books now, but I still look at other guys and I'm like, some of them I'm starting to feel like they're my peers, but I still view most of them as mentors. And Revis is one of them, and Mark Cameron's another, and I just, but they've been so gracious to me, and they give me advice along the way. And so I just still feel like that kid following them around, like, tell me more, what else do I need to do?
I think maybe they still have those moments too with authors. You never know.
I hope we all have people that we look up to.
What other books had, major roles in your life to draw inspiration from?
I mean, I wish I could give you a really clear answer. But I'm a mutt when it comes to my reading tastes. I mean, I read everything. Growing up, I read a lot of fantasy. I read a lot of, the military thrillers like Tom Clancy and W.E.B. Griffin and Stephen Kuntz and Dale Brown and those people. But I'd say one of my favorite authors growing up was Stephen King. I just love his storytelling. Um, I, oh gosh, I'll read Michael Connelly today. I read every book that he comes out with. I think he's a fantastic storyteller. I read a lot of psychological suspense, like more female centric stories, like Riley Sager and Alice Feeney and Colleen Hoover. Not, I think not so much because, I can draw anything from that in my writing, but because I just enjoy a good story and I love to see the way other people do it. Like if I pick up another military thriller book, I can go, okay, I can see this, and I can kind of see where it's going. But sometimes reading outside the genre allows me to go get a completely fresh set of eyes and just enjoy it. Just read for enjoyment and not be work. And so that's kind of why I do that now. But I'll read anything if it's a good story. I don't care what the genre is. I read science fiction. I still read fantasy. I read a lot of different things.
Now that you have written a historical story, do you see yourself writing in historical fiction, full-length novels, or are you still just kind of like, that was fun, but it's a one-off?
No, I do. I do think I have a couple ideas floating around in my head that I would like to kind of flesh out. One of them surrounding my grandfather. Like I said, I have all his logs and everything. It'd be be really cool. And I've always wanted to do it, write a story that kind of follows a bomber crew, as they're training and then obviously deploying over to Europe for the war. But one of the things that I would want to focus on that you don't see a lot of is the emotional, personal aspect. So maybe like the families and what the families are going through as well, as opposed to just the combat and action, because as a veteran, I think that's really important to me to highlight the fact that, when I go to war, it's not just me, it's like my family, my wife, my kids, they're carrying a burden back home. And so that would be a big one. And then I think more geared towards the Western side of things, my gosh, I don't know what he is. My great grandfather, guy named Charlie Siringo. He was known as the cowboy detective. He worked for the Pinkerton Agency.
Oh,
He wrote
wow.
novels. I mean, he was one of the guys that went after Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I mean, there's quite a history there, and I would love to tell his story in a fictional sense, or in a fictionalized way. So that would be kind of fun to do.
And I love the Butch Cassidy connection because we're in Utah and that's where Butch
Hmm.
Cassidy grew up. So we're like, wait, no, he's our outlaw.
Yeah. I grew up in Seattle. I grew up out in the West, and so I, my, you know, I could trace my family through the Oregon Trail and how they settled in Oregon, and just that era for me was I find fascinating. The one thing that would steer me clear of that right now is that the amount of time I would need to do to research it to really do it justice. I just feel like I don't have the time in my schedule to do that. So when I do, I think I might sit down and work on something like that.